I just want to talk in this video basically about how bad thought patterns turn and turn in our minds in response to things that happen, that go on, that hurt us, that offend us in life, that we don't like, and how that warps our view of reality, and how that's just basically a tar pit we can get sucked down into because we want a resolution from our problem, an answer to it, but the answer is there. The reason we don't recognize it basically is because of we're demanding within ourselves to know it so well, and we have to just get over that, as hard as that may be. I'm gonna be reading out of the book of Job certain things. It it talks about all about Job and his friends, but one person or people talk about Job and his friends when we read that book, or when we're referring to that book anyway. But one person in that book that we don't talk about much is what Elihu said, and that's what I'm going to be focusing on. Basically, the way this stuff comes to us is in the form of this turning our head. Something bad happens, or something that offends us, that we feel trapped by happens. We ask, how do I change this? It's obvious pain. It's an obvious problem. We don't get an obvious answer right off the bat in an instant gratification way that we want. So the obsession continues, and the demanding to know an answer gets louder and louder, or have resolution, and that's kind of what blinds us to being able to see the resolution, the answer that is there. Lots of times in the book of Job, I'm not going to go over every little verse, but he demands to meet with God, to talk to God, to see God, and to plead his case before him of why he thinks this is unfair, what he's having to go through. That's one of the things he says. Another thing, I know he says in lots of places, I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. And the start of 23, the place I do have underlined, chapter 23 in Job. Today all my complaint is bitter. His hand is heavy, in spite of my groaning. He's letting the bitterness of his soul drive his thinking and his judgment. And he's speaking out of that. And he's obsessed with, why can't I see God? Also, why won't he appear to me? Why is he just leaving me dangling in all this pain? Also in chapter 23, further on down, starting in verse 8 and on to 9, he says, wanting to see God, behold, I go forward, but he's not there, and backward, but I cannot perceive him. On the left I seek him, but I cannot behold him. I turn to the right, and I cannot see him. He wants to see him because a little bit before that he says, well, I'll just read the whole thing. Today also my complaint is bitter. His hand is heavy in spite of my groaning. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come even to his seat. I would lay my case before him. I would fill my mouth with arguments. I would learn what he would answer me, and understand what he would say to me. Would he contend with me in the greatness of power? No, he would give heed to me. There an upright man could reason with him, and I should be acquitted forever by my judge. Behold, I go forward, but he's not there. Backward, but I cannot perceive him. On the left hand I seek him, but I cannot behold him. I turn to the right, but I cannot see him. He wants to lay his own case that he's been reciting in his own mind, according to his own bitterness, his own thoughts, his own pain, and how he feels like he should get better, which of course that's been affecting his mind and because he's caught in this warping of his mind due to obsessing on these things because of his pain, he thinks that it's something infallible God's supposed to listen to, when in fact he's missing the answers God already does have for him. Here's what Elihu has to say to him. You say, I am clean and without transgression. I am pure and there is no iniquity in me. Behold, he finds occasion against me. He counts me as an enemy. He puts my feet in stocks and watches over all my paths. Behold, in this you're not right. I will answer you. God is greater than man. Why do you contend against him, saying, he will not answer any of my words? Job has been demanding an answer to his pain. But Allah asked him, why do you ask that? Why do you think like that? He will answer none of my words. Here's what he tells him. For God speaks in one way, and then in two, though man does not perceive it. He was not perceiving what was already there for him. And he also warns him in 36:12 that people who get wrapped up in that bitterness, that feeling pain all the time, but unable to perceive that basically the reason they can't recognize their answer is because they're demanding to know it so loud and they think they're just not being answered. He warns him, Elihu warns him in 36 verse 12 that, but if they do not hearken, they perish by the sword, they die without knowledge. A bit earlier on in chapter 35, starting in verse 9, going down to about 14, he tells him this. Because of the multitudes of oppressions, people cry out. They call for help because of the arm of the Almighty. But none say, where is God my Maker, who gives song in the night, who teaches us more than the beasts of the earth, and makes us wiser than the birds of the air? They cry out, but he does not answer. Because of the pride of evil men, surely God does not hear an empty cry, nor does the Almighty regard it. How much less when you say that you do not see him, that the case is before him, and you are waiting on him, when he is really already there. It's just our instant gratification, our own obsessively demanding an answer that again just keeps us from seeing it. But this is what he says is the right way to call to him, instead of just begging for help, to have a respect, a love for the person of God, that he himself is our answer. Again, starting in 10, but none says, where is God my Maker, who gives songs in the night, who teaches us more than the beasts of the earth, and makes us wiser than the birds of the air? They cry out, but he does not answer because of the pride of evil men. Surely God will not answer an empty cry, nor does the Almighty regard it. Basically, what we don't have understanding about is that he himself is the answer, who calls all things into perfect being. And I wish I could make that more practical. Not that there isn't a practical resolution of things, but that's something we kind of have to get to ourselves. It's a journey. There's one more verse in here I thought stood out. Humbly recognizing this and seeking him on these terms, in faith and assurance that that's how you'll receive the answer, is what I think is being called affliction here. In verse 36:21, Elihu warns him, take heed, do not turn to iniquity, for this you have chosen rather than affliction. This ties in with a lot of the stuff in Psalm 74 also. There's one more thing out of Job 36, verses 17 and 18. Psalm, what did I say? I mean Psalm 73. Did I say 34? But Job 36, 17 and 18 is going to tie right in with Psalm 73, the same concept, and I'm about to take you there. But you are full of judgment on the wicked. Judgment and justice seize you, beware, lest wrath entice you to scoffing. Now I'll show you what Psalm 73 says. My steps had well nigh slipped, starting in the second half of verse 2, going down to verse 3. Psalm 73, my steps had well nigh slipped, for I was envious of the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. Verse 16, the turning in his own head, obsessing of an answer, driving himself crazy, and then finally realizing his answer was in basically just a mystical relational knowledge of the person of God. That's what happens in verse 16 through 17. I'm still talking about the prosperity of the wicked and how upset he was about that. But verse 16 says, but when I thought how to understand this, it seemed to me a wearisome task until I went into the sanctuary of God. Then I perceived their end. And I also want to read verses of the same Psalm 21 through 23. It's an illustration of how not having the knowledge from the sanctuary of God affects our minds in regards to things like this. It says, starting 21, when my soul was embittered, and when I was pricked in heart, I was stupid and ignorant. I was like a beast towards thee. Nevertheless, I am continually with thee. Thou dost hold my right hand. Anyway, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about tonight. Let's see if there's any other points I had written down that I just kind of forgotten. No, except for just one little thing. When Elihu says stuff like this to Job, though the scriptures don't clearly spell it out, I believe that Job heeded and took his words to heart, and immediately in the book of Job, after Elihu is through talking to him, God does show himself to him, and Job says, I've heard of you, but people talk about you, but I've never seen you. God finally does answer him the way he wanted to when he accepted some of the things that calmed from Elihu, that helped change his perspective and calm some of his demanding to see God on his own terms. When he finally let go of himself and his own world of pain, that's when he was released, or when he was released for God to be able to see God like he was wanting to. But anyway,